Hello there, and welcome back to the LRJ Chess channel. We've been doing a lot of chess recently, but there's something that I forgot to teach you. So, between all of the opening strategies, all of the history, and everything that you've learned recently, I realized that there's one thing in my videos that you still might be confused about. So today, I want to teach you what that is. In many of the puzzles, you will have seen a specific move. Even if I said the move out loud as the answer, you could have seen on the position or next to the position something that resembled a coordinate and a piece. That is called chess notation. So when you play a chess game, you're required to write down all of your moves on a piece of paper in a tournament. So for example, if white plays the move pawn to d4, you would have to write that on a piece of paper. If black responds by moving his knight to c6, he would have to write that move down. So the moves that you see on answers to some puzzles or positions, or even the ones that I say, are actual representation of the notation that you have to do in a chess game. So today, that's something we're going to look at, and I'm going to teach you how to accurately notate your games. If you already play on chess.com or any online platform, you'll already know that they automatically notate your games. So that's not something you have to worry about. But if you want to play a tournament in person, which I highly recommend, there are so many great tournaments, especially in the Bay Area where I'm from. Shout out Mechanics and Berkeley Chess School, as always. You're going to have to notate your games. So to do that, you need to know how to mark each of the pieces and how to mark the squares. The good thing is, from an earlier video about the basics of chess, you already learned how to mark the squares. The squares are your coordinates, A through H and 1 through 8. So whenever a piece moves to a certain square, that's the coordinate that shows up on your notation. Let me explain a little bit more. Let's say that white moved out his knight. He played knight to c3. Well, that's the exact move you would write in your notation. You wouldn't write out the word knight. That would get a little tedious after a while. But you would write n for knight, and then c3, the square that it moves to. Now, I know what you must be thinking. Ladia, you're dumb. Knight starts with K. It's one of those odd English words. But here's the problem. King starts with K as well, and kings are more important than knights. So in this hierarchy, king got assigned K and knight got assigned N. So let's go through each of the pieces. When you're moving your king, you would say K. You would write down the letter K and then you would write whatever square it moves to. With your queen, you write down the letter Q and then whatever square it moves to. Bishop is B and then the square it moves to. Knight is N and then the square it moves to. Rook is R and then the square it moves to. And with all that repetition, can you guess what the pawn would be? If you guessed P, you're wrong. Sorry for tricking you. So for pawns, you actually don't write the piece. You just write the square it goes to. I think it's a little odd to have this different, but I've gotten used to it over the years. If you move pawn to d4, you would just write the square d4. And it's assumed that a pawn moved there because there was no piece. If you want to move your bishop to d4 instead, you would write b d4. That's how you would know a bishop went there. When you're moving pieces, all of your pieces are uppercase letters. They're very important. Your king, your queen, bishop, knight, rook. All of them will be capital letters. But when you're moving to a square, every single coordinate on the board will be represented by a lowercase letter. So that's why if you want to move your bishop to the B file, you wouldn't have BB5 as two capital Bs. You would have a capital B for your bishop, a lowercase b for the B file, and 5 for the fifth rank. And that would tell you your bishop moves to the B5 square. Now, if you capture a piece, that actually is in the notation. if you play a move that takes a piece, that's represented by an X. So if you move your piece to a square, let's say E5, where your opponent's piece is, that would be knight takes E5, for example. In notation, it would be NX E5, and that's how you would prove it. If you put the enemy king in check, that's a plus. If you go checkmate, that's a hashtag. And those are just some things that you need to know about chess notation. On the screen throughout this lesson, you will have seen examples popping up of the correct way to notate. At this point, I want you to review the entire page. This is everything you need to know about chess notation. Now, it may be a little confusing at first. It technically isn't a chess lesson. It's a lesson about writing chess moves. But the fact that I'm going to be using it in every single video, and the fact that you're going to need to write this way if you play in chess tournaments, I think this was an important little lesson to teach you before we move on to other lessons in the middle game or even past that. Let's do some practice notating a chess game. What we're going to do is look through one of my games that I played a while back, and we're going to click through the moves, and I'm going to say what move was played, and you'll hear how the notation is. Then, to the right of the board, you'll see a basic notation sheet, and as the move appears on the board and I say it, it will be written down on the notation sheet. That way, you can see what move is played, you can hear what the notation sounds like, and you can read it on the paper. This game will only include the moves with no explanations. If you would like explanations to this game, check back in on a later video where I will go through all of that. But without further ado, let's get started. I was playing as white and I started with e4. My opponent played e5. I went knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop to c5, castles on the king side, pawn to d6, h3, bishop to b6, rook to e1, h6, c3, knight to f6, d4, e takes d4, c takes d4, castles on the king side, knight to c3, rook to e8, bishop to f4, knight to h5, queen to d2, knight takes f4, queen takes f4, queen e7, e5, d takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, rook takes e5, queen f8, queen takes f7 check, queen takes f7, rook takes e8 check, king to h7, bishop takes f7, bishop takes d4, rook a to e1, bishop to f6, bishop e6, bishop takes e6, rook 1 takes e6, rook d8, rook takes d8, bishop takes d8, rook e8, bishop f6, knight d5, and then black resigned. Black gave up. As you can see, white is winning by a rook in this position, so he has a material advantage. Does that make sense now? Or is it still a little bit confusing? If it's confusing, don't worry. I did go a little quick, and it was only one game. So if you need more practice, review this game, or you can look at games online on either chess.com or any other chess website that you may find. They will all be accompanied with notation with how the moves should be. But before we finish, I have two quick comments. There were two types of moves that seemed a little bit different than the rest. In this position, white played the move rook to e1, but I said rook a to e1. Now, why might that be? Notice how both rooks have the ability to move to the e1 square. If you said rook to e1, it wouldn't be clear which rook was moving to e1. That's why if two pieces can move to the same square, you need to specify which piece would go there. Since one rook is on the A file and another rook is on the E file, saying rook A to E1 basically means the rook on the A file moves to E1. Similarly, a couple moves later, we get to a position where white plays rook takes E6. But in this example, I said rook 1 takes E6. Why not rook E takes E6? Well, in this case, both rooks are on the E file. So saying rook takes E6 would not be enough. Saying rook E takes E6 would still not clarify it enough. In this case, you have to specify which rank the piece is on. If you said rook 1 takes E6, that would be this rook. And if you said rook 8 takes E6, that would be with your other rook. These are two small notation changes that are really important to know. But with that, we've completed this game, and you've gotten everything you need to know about notation up to this point. So after you've finished this video, try practicing writing chess notation by yourself. It'll be slow at first, but it'll start to feel like an easy language that you've learned. It'll be really helpful when you play in tournaments as well, because you'll be required to notate your games. So starting early and practicing is definitely a good thing to do. Thanks for tuning in to this short, different kind of video specifically on chess notation, but I'll be seeing you soon with more opening strategies. Until then, this is LRJ Chess signing off with a checkmate.